I still remember the sound the trailer made when it started to come around. Not the crash, not the glass, not any of that. Just that first sound, that groan. Like the whole rig was trying to tell me something I didn't have time to hear. 22 years later, and I can still hear it. Sitting here in my living room in Arizona, 1,000 miles from that stretch of Wyoming highway, 2 decades removed from that night, and still, that sound. This was February of 2002, cold February. The kind of cold that Wyoming does better than just about anywhere else in this country. I was 43 years old, had been driving trucks since I was 25, 18 years on the road by that point, 18 years of running freight across every state you can name, and a few you probably can't find on a map without looking hard. I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought 18 years meant something. It doesn't mean anything. Not really. Not when the wind decides to do what the wind wants to do. The road doesn't care how long you've been out there. It doesn't keep track. It doesn't give you credit for experience or safe driving awards or all those years without an accident on your record. One day, you're just another driver in a long line of drivers going about your business, running your freight, making your appointments. And the next day, you're the one sitting in a cab that isn't pointed the right direction anymore. That's what happened to me outside Cheyenne, on Interstate 80, westbound lanes. About 15 miles out from the city, where the highway runs through. Nothing but open grassland and fence posts, and that endless Wyoming sky. I should start at the beginning, the real beginning. Not the accident itself, but the hours and the days that led up to it. The choices I made, the signs I ignored. Because that's what the story is really about when I think back on it now. Not the crash, not the rescue, not the recovery, but all those small decisions that added up to me, lying on my side in a frozen median at 2 in the morning, wondering if anyone would ever find me. I was running for a company out of Omaha at the time. Good outfit, family-owned operation. 3 generations of trucking people running that business. The kind of place where the dispatcher knew your name and your wife's name, and asked about your kids when you called in from the road. I'd been with them for about 6 years by that point. Before that, I was owner-operator for a while, running my own truck, being my own boss. But the costs got to be too much. Insurance kept going up. Fuel kept going up. Maintenance on an aging rig kept going up. And I had 2 kids at home who needed things. School supplies, clothes. That trip to Disney World that every kid deserves at least once. So I went back to company driving. Steady paycheck. Benefits for the family. Someone else worrying about the big repairs and the insurance premiums and all that paperwork that comes with running a business. I didn't love it the way I loved being my own boss. There's a freedom to owner-operating that you give up when you drive for someone else. But it was as good work. Honest work. And the people at this particular company treated their drivers like human beings rather than just numbers in a computer somewhere. The run that night was supposed to be simple. Nothing complicated about it. Pick up a load at a distribution center in Council Bluffs, Iowa, just across the river from Omaha. Take it west on Interstate 80 all the way to Salt Lake City. About 800 miles door to door. Standard interstate run. The kind I'd done probably 50 times before over the years. More than that, maybe. I knew every exit on that route, knew every truck stop worth stopping at, knew where the good coffee was and where it wasn't, knew which rest areas had clean facilities and which ones you avoided unless you absolutely had to use them. I was pulling a 53-foot dry van, standard trailer, the most common kind you see out there on the highways. White aluminum sides, company name and logo painted small near the back doors. If you passed me on the road, you wouldn't have looked twice. Just another truck, just another load, just another driver doing what drivers do. The tractor was a Freightliner, 2000 model year, century class. Reliable truck, good truck. I'd been assigned to that particular unit for about 2 years by that point, and I knew it well. Knew how it handled in different weather conditions. Knew how the engine sounded when everything was right, and how it sounded when something was off. Knew the quirks of that particular transmission, the way you had to baby second gear when it was cold, the way the air conditioning rattled a little in the summer. That truck and I had been a lot of miles together, across the Rockies in snowstorms, through the Texas Panhandle in August heat, so bad the pavement got soft under the tires, up and down the California coast, back and forth across the plains more times than I could count. Everything was right that morning when I left the yard in Omaha. I did my pre-trip inspection, like I always did. Like every driver is supposed to do, but not every driver actually does. I walked around the whole rig, all the way around, checking everything. Tires first, all 18 of them. Looking for damage for uneven wear for low pressure. Checking the valve stems. Kicking the sidewalls to feel for soft spots. Then the lights. All of them. Headlights and marker lights and turn signals and brake lights. Walking back and forth, turning them on and off, making sure everything was working. I checked the fifth wheel connection, where the trailer hooks to the tractor. Made sure it was locked and secure. Tugged on the kingpin release to confirm it wouldn't let go. Checked the glad hands where the air lines connect. Made sure the seals were good, the connections tight, no air leaking out. Checked the landing gear on the trailer to make sure it was all the way up. Checked the doors to make sure they were latched and locked. Walked the whole 53 feet of that trailer, looking for damage, for anything hanging loose, for anything that might cause a problem somewhere down the road. Everything looked good. Everything was where it should be. Everything was in working order. The load was consumer goods, household items. The kind of freight that fills up the shelves at department stores and warehouse clubs and those big chain retailers you find in every city. 38,000 pounds according to the bills of lading. Not a heavy load by trucking standards. Not a light one either. Just average. The kind of load you don't think twice about because there's nothing special about it. No hazardous materials. No oversized dimensions. No special handling requirements. Just pallets and pallets of boxes containing things people were eventually going to buy and take home and use until they wore out or broke or got replaced by something newer. I thought about those boxes sometimes. All that freight I hauled over the years. Billions of pounds of stuff moving across this country. Stuff that people needed or wanted, or thought they needed or wanted. Most of it I never saw. Never knew what was actually inside those trailers. Just weight and dimensions on a piece of paper. But sometimes I'd wonder about it. Who was going to end up with this particular box? What they'd do with whatever was inside it. How their life might be slightly different because this truck delivered this load to this store on this particular day. Probably sounds strange thinking about things like that, but you have a lot of time to think when you're driving. Hours and hours with nothing but the road and the radio and your own thoughts for company. I picked up the load at the distribution center around 3 in the afternoon, February afternoon in Iowa. Cold, but clear. The kind of winter day where the sun is bright, but has no warmth to it. Like it's just going through the motions up there in the sky, shining, but not really trying. The temperature was sitting right around 20 degrees when I pulled away from the loading dock. That pale winter sky stretching overhead. That endless blue that you get when there's no moisture in the air, no clouds, nothing between you and space except all those miles of atmosphere. The paperwork was clean. The seals on the trailer doors were intact, stamped with the proper numbers matching the bill of lading. The dock workers had loaded it well as far as I could tell. Weight seemed evenly distributed, nothing shifting around back there when I pulled away from the dock and started toward the gate. A smooth start to what should have been a smooth run. I remember thinking exactly that as I merged onto Interstate 80 heading west. This is going to be a smooth run. Everything's starting off right. The truck feels good, the load is balanced. The weather is clear. I've got a full tank and plenty of hours on my lot. Nothing to worry about. Just 800 miles of familiar highway between me and Salt Lake City. That's what I thought. I put on a country station out of Omaha as I settled into the right lanes and started building speed. Old country. Not the stuff they play on the radio now. The real stuff. Merle Haggard singing about being on the run. George Jones crying about some woman who did him wrong. Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson and all those outlaws from back in the day. The kind of music my father used to listen to when he was behind the wheel. He was a truck driver too, my father. Long haul, coast to coast. Did it for 40 years before his back finally gave out and he had to retire. Some families are farming families, tied to a piece of land for generations. Some are fishing families, going out on the boats like their fathers and grandfathers did before them. We were trucking people. Still are. 3 generations of us. Now if you count my son who started driving a few years ago. Following in the tracks his grandfather laid down, and his father followed. The first few hours out of Council Bluffs were easy. Nebraska is flat country, some of the flattest in America. The interstate runs east-west like a ruler, drawn across the landscape, barely curving for hundreds of miles. You can see the horizon ahead of you and behind you, and on both sides, nothing but farmland stretching out to the edges of the earth. In the summer, it's all green corn and soybeans growing tall. In the winter, it's brown and white and gray frozen fields, waiting for spring snow patches in the low spots where the sun doesn't reach. I made good time through Nebraska. The road was dry. Traffic was light. Just me and a few other trucks and the occasional car heading west toward Denver or beyond. The Freightliner was running smooth engine, humming along at that sweet spot where it sounds most content. 65-70 miles per hour, eating up the miles. The trailer tracking straight behind me like it should. No problems, no worries. I stopped for fuel in North Platte around 8 in the evening. That's roughly the halfway point across Nebraska. A good spot to top off the tanks and stretch your legs and grab something to eat. I wasn't low on fuel, still had a quarter tank at least, but I made it a habit to fill up whenever I was heading into uncertain territory. And Wyoming in February was always uncertain territory. The weather can change fast up there on the high plains. A clear night can turn into a blizzard in an hour. And you don't want to be caught short on fuel when that happens. I pulled into the truck stop and found a spot at the diesel island. Got out and started fueling. Walked around the truck while the diesel pumped, stretching the stiffness out of my back and legs. 5 hours in a truck seat can make you feel like an old man, even when you're not. That's when I first really noticed the wind. It had been calm when I left Omaha. Just a gentle breeze, nothing to speak of. But standing outside the truck, in North Platte, I could feel it had picked up. That winter wind that comes down off the Rockies and sweeps across the plains with nothing to slow it down. Cold and dry and sharp, the kind that cuts through your jacket and makes your ears ache within minutes. The flags at the truck stop were flapping. Not bad. Not sideways, but definitely moving more than they had been earlier in the day. I watched them for a minute while the tank filled. Old habit. Flags tell you a lot about what you're driving into if you know how to read them. I should have paid more attention. Should have checked the weather radio. Should have asked the other drivers in the restaurant what they were hearing about conditions to the west. That's what experienced drivers do. They share information. They look out for each other. Someone coming east can tell you what they just drove through. Someone who's been sitting in the lot for a few hours might have heard something useful on the Citizens Band. But I didn't do any of that. I was making good time. I felt fine. The truck was running well. I just wanted to keep moving, get through Wyoming, before the night got too old. Maybe stop in Rock Springs for a few hours of sleep if I needed it. I grabbed a sandwich from the convenience store. Ham and cheese on white bread. Nothing special. Just something to fill the empty spot in my stomach. And a large coffee black, strong enough to dissolve the plastic stirrer if you left it in there too long. Road coffee. Trucker coffee. The kind that keeps you sharp for a few more hours when your body is starting to think about sleep. I ate half the sandwich while I walked around the truck one more time, checking the tires again, checking the lights, looking at the glad hands and the fifth wheel. Everything still looked good. Everything was still secure. The wind pushed against me as I walked, not hard but insistent, like it was trying to get my attention, trying to tell me something. I should have listened. I finished the sandwich, threw away the wrapper, climbed back into the cab. The heater had been running while I was inside, and the seat was warm, comfortable, welcoming. I settled in, adjusted my mirrors, took a sip of that strong black coffee, and I pulled back onto the interstate, heading west into Wyoming. The thing about driving at night is that it's a different kind of tired than being sleepy during the day. Your body has rhythms, cycles that it's been following since before humans had trucks or roads, or any reason to be awake at 2 in the morning. When the sun goes down, something in your brain starts saying, time to sleep. Doesn't matter that you've got miles to make, and a schedule to keep, and a load that needs to be in Salt Lake by tomorrow afternoon. The primitive part of your brain, the ancient machinery that's been running since the caves, it doesn't care about any of that. It just knows it's dark outside, and dark means sleep. You fight against it. Every night driver fights against it. You drink coffee. You turn up the radio. You roll down the window and let the cold air hit your face. You talk to yourself, or sing along with the music, or call home if someone's awake to answer. Some guys I knew would do math problems in their heads, multiplication tables, long division, anything to keep the brain engaged and working. Me, I had my own methods. I'd think about things, work through problems, plan out projects I wanted to do at home, design shelves I was going to build in my garage, figure out how to fix the leaky faucet in the bathroom. Mental exercises that kept my mind active without distracting me from the road. And I watched the highway, really watched it. Every sign, every mile marker, every change in the pavement, keeping my eyes moving, looking ahead, then at the mirrors, then at the gauges, then ahead again. A constant cycle of visual checks that kept me alert and engaged. That night, though, the wind made it different. You couldn't slip into that comfortable rhythm of highway hypnosis because the truck kept moving, kept shifting. Every gust was a reminder that you were wrestling something heavy through a hostile environment, that you had to stay focused, stay ready, stay present every single second. I crossed into Wyoming around 11. The sign on the roadside said what it always says: "Welcome to Wyoming, forever west." I'd seen that sign hundreds of times over the years. It used to make me feel something. Excitement, maybe. A sense of adventure. Wyoming was big country. Empty country. The kind of place where you could drive for an hour and not see another human being. That night, it just made me feel alone. The terrain started to change almost immediately after I crossed the state line. Wyoming is different from Nebraska in ways that are hard to describe if you haven't seen both. Nebraska is flat, truly flat, the kind of flat that makes you understand why people thought the earth was a tabletop. Wyoming isn't flat. It rolls. It has elevation changes that you feel in the engine. Hills that aren't exactly hills, but something more subtle. A rising and falling of the land that goes on for miles. And the wind, God, the wind. In Nebraska it had been noticeable. In Wyoming, it was something else entirely. It came off the mountains to the north and west, and it swept across that high plateau like it owned the place. Because it did. The wind owns Wyoming in winter. The people and the animals and the buildings are just visitors. The wind is what lives there. I could feel the trailer starting to push around behind me. Not bad yet, not dangerous, but definitely there. That pressure against the aluminum sides, that constant force trying to move us off course. I adjusted my grip on the steering wheel, made small corrections. Counter-steering into the gusts, keeping the rig tracking straight. This is manageable, I told myself. I've been through worse. Had I thought? Had I really? Or was that just something I was telling myself because I didn't want to stop? Because I wanted to keep making miles? Because pulling over and waiting out the wind would put me behind schedule, and I'd have to explain to the dispatcher why I was late. Pride, stubbornness, whatever you want to call it. That's what kept me going when I should have stopped. The wind got steadily worse over the next hour. The gusts got stronger, more frequent, harder to predict. Sometimes they'd come from straight north, hitting the trailer square on the side. Sometimes they'd swirl around and come from the northwest or the northeast, pushing the rig at angles I wasn't expecting. I slowed down, dropped from 70 to 65, then to 61. I moved into the right lane and stayed there, giving myself room on the left side in case a gust pushed me over. The truck was swaying more noticeably now. I could feel it in my whole body. That side-to-side motion that tells you the wind is getting serious. Other trucks were still on the road. I could see their lights ahead and behind me. Some of them were slowing down too. Some seemed to be pushing through at normal speed. Everyone making their own calculations, their own decisions, their own gambles. I passed a few trucks that had pulled off onto the shoulder. Smart drivers. Experienced drivers. The ones who had looked at the conditions and decided it wasn't worth the risk. They were sitting there with their running lights on, engines idling, waiting for the wind to die down. I should have joined them. Should have found a wide spot and parked it and taken a nap and waited until morning. But I was making progress, still moving forward, still eating up the miles. Cheyenne was getting closer, and once I got past Cheyenne, the terrain would change. More shelter, less exposure. It would get easier. That's what I told myself. It would get easier. I was about 40 miles out from Cheyenne when I passed that big truck stop on the south side of the highway, the one with the flags. I noticed those flags from half a mile away because of what they were doing, or rather, what they weren't doing. They weren't waving, they weren't flapping. They were standing straight out from their poles, rigid horizontal, like metal bars, painted to look like cloth. So much wind that the fabric couldn't move. Could he only point in the direction the air was going, like a compass needle pointing north? I've seen flags do that a handful of times in my life. Every single time I was already stopped, already arced, already smart enough to know that when the flags go stiff like that, you don't drive. You wait. But that night, I looked at those flags and I kept going. I don't know why exactly. I've asked myself that question 1,000 times over the years. Was it pride? Was it stubbornness? Was it just momentum? The simple fact that I was already moving and stopping felt like giving up. Maybe all of those things, maybe none of them. Maybe sometimes people just make bad decisions and there is no deeper explanation for it. Just a moment of foolishness that changes everything. I watched those flags in my mirror as I pulled past the truck stop. Watched them shrink in the distance, still rigid, still pointing, still trying to tell me something I didn't want to hear. And I kept going west. The next 15 miles were the longest of my life up to that point. The wind was relentless, gusting hard every few seconds. The trailer was all over the lane behind me, swinging left with every blast, and I was fighting the wheel, constantly steering right, to compensate my shoulders, aching, my hand cramping from the grip. I slowed down even more, 55, 50. The engine lugging along in a higher gear than it wanted, because I was afraid to touch anything, afraid that any change, any shift, any adjustment might be the one that pushed us over the edge. The road ahead was empty. Whatever trucks had been in front of me had either pulled off or gotten far enough ahead that I couldn't see their lights anymore. Behind me, the same thing. Just blackness in the mirrors. Just the night and the wind and the faint glow of Cheyenne on the horizon. I started counting down the miles. 15 to go. 14. 13. Each mile marker a small victory. Each one bringing me closer to the city where there would be buildings and windbreaks and relative safety. At 10 miles out, I let myself believe I was going to make it. The wind was still fierce, but I was handling it. The truck was swaying, but staying upright. Just a few more minutes, just a few more miles, and then I hit that open stretch. There's a section of Interstate 80 east of Cheyenne where the highway runs through absolutely nothing. No trees, no buildings, no elevation changes to break up the flow of air. Just flat grassland on both sides, stretching to the horizons. Maybe 2 miles of that, maybe 3. It's barely noticeable when the weather is good. You drive through it in 2 minutes and don't think twice. But in a Wyoming wind, that stretch becomes a killing ground. The gust that hit me came from the north-northwest, came across that open grassland with absolutely nothing to slow it down or deflect it or absorb any of its force. Came at my trailer like a fist. I felt the whole rig lurch sideways. I corrected, steered hard to the right, trying to counterbalance, trying to keep the trailer behind me instead of beside me. But the wind didn't stop. It kept pushing. Sustained force against 53 feet of aluminum sail. And the trailer started to slide. Not roll, slide. The tires were still on the pavement, but they were moving sideways, pushed by all that wind, losing their grip on the frozen asphalt. And when a trailer starts sliding at highway speed, there's only one place it can go. Around. The jackknife happened faster than I can describe it. 1 second, I was a truck driver, wrestling with a crosswind. The next second, I was a passenger in a disaster that was already happening, had already happened, was past the point where anything else did could change it. The trailer swung left. The tractor tried to follow, but the physics were wrong. The angles were wrong. Everything was wrong. I felt the whole rig fold up like a closing knife. The trailer coming around beside me. My mirrors suddenly full of white aluminum instead of highway. I hit the brakes. Instinct. Pure instinct. The training said, don't brake, let off the gas. Try to steer out of it. But the animal part of my brain screamed, stop, make it stop, make everything stop. And my foot went down before I could think about it. The tractor wheels locked up. The trailer swung faster. And then we left the road. I felt the tractor tip. Felt gravity shift. Felt the world rotate around me in a direction it wasn't supposed to go. The driver's side window was suddenly below me instead of beside me. The passenger side was above me. The horizon was vertical. And then impact. The noise is something I've never been able to fully remember. My brain didn't record it. Or if it did, it locked those files away, somewhere I can't access this. I remember silence before. I remember silence after. But the actual sound of an 80,000-pound truck hitting frozen ground at 30 miles an hour, the scream of metal and the shattering of glass, and the thunder of the cargo shifting in the trailer behind me, that's a hole in my memory, a gap where the sound should be. What I remember instead is the stillness that came after. The truck had stopped. I had stopped. Everything had stopped except the wind, which was still howling outside, buffeting against the exposed underside of the tractor. I was hanging sideways in my seatbelt. The webbing was cutting into my chest and shoulder. My left arm was pinned underneath me, trapped between my body and the door that had become the floor. I couldn't feel that arm. Couldn't move it. Just knew it was there because something was underneath me, and it had to be my arm. The cab was dark. The headlights were pointing somewhere else now, off into the median, illuminating nothing useful. The dashboard lights were still glowing, telling me things that didn't matter anymore. Engine temperature, fuel level, oil pressure, numbers for a truck that was lying on its side in a frozen field. The engine was still running. I could hear it, feel it vibrating through the frame, still turning over, like nothing had happened, like this was normal, like trucks always ended up horizontal in the middle of the night. I tried to move, tried to take stock of what was damaged and what wasn't. My right arm worked. I could lift it, flex the fingers, reach out, and touch the steering wheel that was no longer in the right position. My left arm was something else. Numb. Wrong. A deep ache in the shoulder that told me things had torn or broken or both. My legs seemed okay. I could feel them, could move them. They were tangled in the pedals somehow, but they worked. My head was ringing. Whether from impact or just shock, I couldn't tell. A high-pitched whine in my ears that wouldn't go away. And I was cold. Already cold. February in Wyoming. 20 degrees outside, maybe less. The heater was still blowing, but the windshield was cracked and cold air was coming in through gaps I couldn't see. The door beneath me was pressed against frozen earth, conducting cold directly into my left side. I was in trouble. I knew that much. I just didn't know yet how much trouble. The first thing I tried to do was get out of the seatbelt. Just get free of that constraint, so I could move, so I could reach things, so I could do something other than hang there helplessly. I reached down with my right hand and found the release button. Pushed it. The mechanism was jammed or broken. The angle was wrong for how the seatbelt was designed to work. I pushed harder. Nothing. I tried pulling on the webbing itself, tried to create some slack, but it had locked up during the rollover, was cinched tight against my chest, cutting into my ribs with every breath. Okay, different approach. I looked around the cab for something to cut with. A knife, scissors, anything with an edge. But everything had been thrown around during the crash. The contents of the cab were scattered. I couldn't see much in the darkness, couldn't reach much with my one working arm. The Citizens Band radio was still mounted on the dash, but the dash was above me now, and the radio was out of reach. I could see the microphone swinging gently on its coiled cord, maybe 3 feet away. Might as well have been 3 miles. I tried to swing toward it, tried to use the momentum of my body to reach, but the seatbelt held me tight, and every movement sent pain shooting through my left shoulder. After a while I stopped trying, just hung there, breathing, thinking, trying to figure out what to do next. The radio was playing some song I don't remember now, one of those old country songs about heartbreak and highways. The kind of song that means nothing until it means everything, until you're living it. I thought about turning it off. The sound was coming from somewhere above me. Now the speakers in the wrong position, the music distorted by the angle. But I didn't. Left it playing. Let it fill the silence between the gusts of wind. Something to focus on besides the cold, besides the pain, besides the growing certainty that this might be how it ends. The trailer had come to rest at an angle behind the tractor. I couldn't see it, but I could sense it there. 53 feet of aluminum and freight, probably torn open somewhere, spilling its contents across the frozen median. All that cargo I'd been so careful with. All those boxes that someone somewhere was waiting for. I wondered how long it would take the company to find out. The dispatcher would try to reach me on the satellite system, wouldn't get a response, would start making calls. The highway patrol would eventually locate the wreck, run the plates, notify the company, and then someone would call Karen. I thought about her getting that call, the phone ringing in the middle of the night, her reaching for it half asleep, expecting something routine, a question about the schedule, a reminder about something I forgot, and instead getting the words that change everything. There's been an accident. Your husband's truck. We don't know yet if he's alive. I didn't want her to get that call. Didn't want her to feel what she'd feel when those words hit her. The floor dropping out. The world going sideways just like my truck had gone sideways. I had to survive. Had to make it through this. If only so she wouldn't have to live with that call, being the last thing she heard about me. My left hand was completely numb by then. I couldn't feel anything past the elbow. It was just this dead weight trapped beneath me. Blood circulation, probably cut off by the angle nerve signals, blocked by whatever damage had happened to the shoulder. I started worrying about losing the arm, thinking about those stories you hear. Trapped hikers who had to cut off their own limbs to survive. Accident victims who lost hands or feet to frostbite because help came too late. The thoughts weren't helping. I knew that. But I couldn't stop them. They just kept coming one after another, each one darker than the last. What if no one finds me before morning? What if the cold takes my fingers first, then my feet, then more? What if I survive, but I'm never whole again? What if I can't drive anymore? What if I can't hold my wife, can't hug my kids, and can't do any of the things that make life worth living? I tried to push the thoughts away, tried to focus on something else, but they kept coming back. The cold was making it hard to control my mind, making it hard to stay positive, making it easy to spiral down into the worst possibilities. I started reciting things, lists, facts, anything I could remember that required concentration. The states in order of admission to the Union: Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Georgia, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Maryland, South Carolina, New Hampshire, Virginia, New York, North Carolina, Rhode Island. I got stuck around number 15. Couldn't remember if Kentucky came before or after Tennessee. It didn't matter. The point wasn't accuracy. The point was keeping my brain engaged, keeping the darkness at bay. I tried the presidents next. Washington Adams, Jefferson Madison Monroe. Adams again, Jackson Van Buren Harrison Tyler Polk. Got further with that one. Made it all the way to Roosevelt before I started confronting the order of the early 20th century. Taft and Wilson and Harding and Coolidge and Hoover. They all blurred together in my frozen mind. But it helped. The recitation helped. Gave me something to focus on, besides the pain and the cold and the fear. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes from being hurt and alone in the dark. I'd never experienced it before that night. Never knew it existed. It's different from regular loneliness. Different from being by yourself in a motel room on a Saturday night, or eating dinner alone at a truck stop counter, or driving for hours without passing another vehicle. Those are ordinary loneliness. The kind that everyone experiences. The kind that passes. This was something else. This was existential. This was the knowledge that I might die here in this society, in this truck, and no one would know until it was too late. The knowledge that all the people who loved me, all the people I loved, were going about their lives right now, sleeping and breathing and being alive, while I was hanging in a frozen cab, fighting to keep my eyes open. I wanted to reach them somehow, wanted to send some kind of signal across all those miles of darkness. I'm here. I'm alive. I need help. But there was no signal to send. Just me and the truck and the wind. I thought about my father, about all the runs he'd made over his 40 years on the road, all the close calls he must have had that he never talked about, all the nights when he wondered if he'd make it home. He was retired now, living in a little house in Nebraska with my mother, probably asleep right now like everyone else in my life, not knowing that his son was lying in a ditch in Wyoming, fighting to survive. I thought about calling him when I got out of this, telling him everything, asking him about his own close calls, the stories he had kept to himself all these years. I wondered if he'd be proud of me, or disappointed. Proud that I'd survived, maybe, but disappointed that I'd been stupid enough to keep driving when I should have stopped. He would have stopped. I was sure of that. He'd been driving too long to make the kind of rookie mistake I'd made. The old man knew when to push and when to pull over. I thought I knew too. I was wrong. The wind shifted at some point, came from a different direction. Instead of hitting the underside of the truck, it started pushing against the cab itself, against the passenger side that was now facing up toward the sky. The truck rocked with each gust. More than before. I could feel it tipping, settling, tipping again. Like something was trying to decide whether to push it all the way over or leave it where it was. I held my breath with each gust, waited for the final push that would send me rolling again, tumbling down the median toward God knows what. Maybe the fence line, maybe the opposite lanes of the highway, maybe just more frozen ground. But the wind never quite did it. Each gust would push, and the truck would tip, and then it would settle back. A terrible rhythm. Rock and settle, like being in a boat on rough water, except the water was wind, and the boat was 20 tons of steel, and the shore was nowhere in sight. I thought about all the things I wished I'd done differently. Not just that night, but in my whole life. I wished I'd spent more time at home, more time with Karen and the kids, fewer hours on the road chasing miles and paychecks. What did any of that matter now? The money I'd earned, the loads I'd delivered, the schedules I'd met. None of it meant anything, not compared to the things I'd missed. The school plays and the birthday parties and the ordinary Tuesday evenings that add up to a life. I wished I'd told people things. My parents, my brother, my kids, Karen. All the things you think, but don't say, because there'll always be time later. Because you're embarrassed. Because you're a man, and men don't talk about feelings. I love you. I'm proud of you. You mean everything to me. Simple words, important words. The words that matter most. And I'd been hoarding them like they were precious, doling them out sparingly, saving them for special occasions, as if there would always be another chance. Hanging in that truck, I made myself a promise. If I survive this, I told myself I'm going to say those words every day. To everyone who needs to hear them, I'm not going to die with things unsaid. My teeth were chattering by then, uncontrollable. The cold had gotten so deep that my body couldn't even shiver properly anymore. Just this chattering of teeth that made my jaw ache and made it hard to think. I tried clenching them together, holding them still through force of will. But the moment I relaxed, they'd start again. Chatter, chatter, chatter. Like some kind of broken machinery that wouldn't stop. The sound was getting on my nerves. One more thing to deal with. One more irritation on top of all the other irritations. On top of the pain and the cold and the fear and the loneliness. I found myself getting angry. At the sound, at the cold, at the wind, at myself. At the whole stupid situation. At every choice I'd made that had led me to this moment. Anger was better than despair. I held on to it. Let it warm me a little. Let it give me something to feel besides the cold. Stupid wind, stupid truck, stupid me. I'm not going to die here. I'm too angry to die. More time passed. The anger faded. Everything fades eventually. I was left with just the waiting, the endurance, the simple task of drawing one breath after another, keeping my heart beating, keeping my eyes open, surviving moment to moment until help arrived. If help arrived. I tried not to think about that. If. Tried to stay in the when. When help arrives, when they see to me. When I get out of this truck, when I see my family again. When. The word became a mantra, a replacement for the prayers I'd been saying. When I get out, when they find me, when this is over. When? I don't know exactly. When I realized that the ski was getting lighter. It happened so gradually that I almost missed it. One moment, it was pure black out the windshield, and the next moment, it was dark gray. Then, light gray. Then that pale pre-dawn glow that comes before the sun breaks the horizon. I'd made it through the night. That realization hit me harder than anything else, harder than the accident itself, harder than the cold or the pain or the fear. I'd survived the night. I'd survived the darkness. Whatever happened next, at least I'd made it this far. I started kicking. Couldn't help it. Tears freezing on my cheeks almost as soon as they appeared. But still crying. From relief. From exhaustion. From the accumulated weight of everything I'd been through. The sun was coming up. I was still alive. That's when Gerald appeared. When the sky was just starting to lighten. When I'd almost given up hope that anyone would ever come. His headlights sweeping across the median. His truck bouncing over the frozen ground. His door opening and his boots crunching through the snow. His voice cutting through the wind. Hello, anyone in there? I've never been so happy to hear a human voice. Never been so grateful that someone took the time to stop, to check, to care about a stranger in trouble. Gerald, a rancher from somewhere north of Cheyenne. A man I'd never met before and would never really meet again. A man who saved my life by doing something simple, by stopping when he could have kept going. The world is full of people like that. People who stop. People who help. People who do the right thing when the easier thing would be to look away. I didn't know that before that night. Didn't think about it. Took it for granted that people were mostly selfish, mostly looking out for themselves. Gerald taught me different. The rescue took longer than I expected. The fire department arrived about 20 minutes after Gerald called. 3 trucks. A dozen men. All that equipment and expertise converging on a frozen field in the middle of nowhere. But getting me out wasn't simple. The cab was crushed in places. The doors were jammed. They couldn't just pull me through a window or lift me out through an opening. They had to cut. The jaws of life. That's what they call the hydraulic tool they use to pry apart wrecked vehicles. I'd heard about it before, seen it demonstrated at safety events, but I'd never experienced it from the inside. The sound is something else. a grinding, groaning, shrieking of metal, being forced to do things it doesn't want to do. The cab shuddering around you as the tools bite in. The slow opening of a hole that wasn't there before. It took them over an hour, working carefully, making sure they didn't hurt me in the process of saving me. Talking to me the whole time, asking questions, keeping me conscious and engaged. What's your name? How old are you? What day is it? I answered as best I could. Voice crispy, throat dry, but still answering, still present, still alive. When they finally pulled me out of that cab, the sun was fully up. A clear winter morning. The sky that impossible blue. The wind had died down to almost nothing, like it had blown itself out overnight. Like it was done with me. I remember looking back at the wreck as they loaded me onto the stretcher. The tractor lying on its side roof, peeled back glass everywhere. The trailer, jackknifed behind it, cargo spilled across the median. All that destruction, all that chaos. And somehow I'd survived it. Somehow I was still here. The paramedics were talking to me, asking questions, checking vitals. But I wasn't really hearing them. I was just looking at the sky, that blue sky, that beautiful ordinary morning sky that I had almost never seen again. I'm alive, I thought. I'm alive, and it's morning and the sun is shining. That's all that mattered. Everything else could wait. The hospital in Cheyenne was small but good. The kind of regional medical center that handles everything from farm accidents to heart attacks to tourists who didn't realize how serious altitude sickness could be. They knew what they were doing with trauma cases, knew how to treat someone who'd been through what I'd been through. The first surgery was on my arm. The break was complicated. Multiple fractures, bone fragments that had shifted during the hours I spent hanging in that cab. They had to go in with plates and screws, piece everything back together, hope it would heal right. The second surgery was on my shoulder. The dislocation had done damage. Torn ligaments, stretched tendons. The surgeon told me later that he wasn't sure I'd ever get full range of motion back. Might be some permanent limitation. Might be some chronic pain. I asked him if I'd be able to drive again. That's all I cared about. Not golf, not tennis, not any of the recreational things that doctors usually worry about when talking about shoulder function. Just driving. Just getting back behind the wheel of a truck. He looked at me for a long moment, probably thinking about all the things he could say, about healing and patience and realistic expectations, about how my trucking days might be over, whether I wanted them to be or not. But what he said was this: give it time. See how the therapy goes. Don't make any decisions yet. That was enough. For the moment, that was enough. Karen stayed with me for the first week, slept in the chair next to my hospital bed, held my hand through the bad nights when the dreams came and the pain medication wore off, fed me ice chips when I couldn't keep anything else down. She's a strong woman, my wife, stronger than I ever gave her credit for. All those years she'd put up with my being gone. All those nights she'd waited for me to call or come home. All the worry she'd carried that I never really understood until I was lying in that hospital bed, seeing it on her face. You scared me, she said one night when they called, when they told me there'd been an accident. I thought I'd lost you. I'm sorry, I told her. I'm so sorry. She shook her head. Don't be sorry. Just don't do it again. Just come home. Always come home. I promised her I would. And I meant it. Every run after that, every load, every mile, I carried that promise with me. Come home. Always come home. The kids came to visit after the first week. Michael and Sarah, 14 and 11. Old enough to understand what had happened. Old enough to be scared. Old enough to need to see their father alive and in one piece, even if that piece was bandaged and bruised and hooked up to machines. Michael tried to be brave, tried to act like it wasn't a big deal, like his dad got into truck wrecks all the time, and this was just another thing. But I could see it in his eyes, the fear, the relief, the complicated emotions that teenage boys don't know how to express. Sarah didn't pretend. She just crowed, climbed onto the bed next to me, and held on to my good arm, and cried until she couldn't cry anymore. My little girl, almost 12, still young enough to need her daddy. I held her and let her cry. Let her get it all out. Promised her the same thing I'd promised her mother. I'm okay. I'm going to be okay. I'm coming home. The company sent flowers. A big arrangement. Lilies and roses with a card signed by everyone in the office. Get well soon. We're thinking of you. Take all the time you need. They also sent a representative. A guy from Human Resources named Tom, who I'd met once or twice at safety meetings. He came into my hospital room with a folder full of paperwork, workers' comp forms, short-term disability applications, all the bureaucracy that kicks in when an employee gets hurt on the job. He was professional about it, sympathetic, but efficient. This is what we need from you. This is what you're entitled to. Here are the numbers to call if you have questions. I signed the papers with my right hand, my left still immobilized, not really reading what I was signing, just wanting to get it done, wanting to think about something other than forms and procedures and the machinery of injury. Before he left, Tom hesitated at the door, turned back. I've been with this company for 15 years, he said. Seen a lot of accidents. Some of them didn't turn out this well. You're lucky to be here. I just wanted you to know that. We all know that. I nodded, thanked him, watched him go. Lucky, that word again. The physical therapy started while I was still in the hospital. Simple stuff at first. Moving my fingers, flexing my wrist, trying to activate the muscles in my arm without putting stress on the healing bone. The therapist was a woman named Margaret, small and wiry and relentlessly cheerful. The kind of person who sees an injured body as a puzzle to be solved, a project to be completed. She didn't accept excuses, didn't accept I can't, or it hurts too much. Of course it hurts, she'd say. Everything worth doing hurts a little. Now show me 10 more reps. I hated her at first. Then I grew to appreciate her. Then by the end, I almost loved her. She pushed me harder than I would have pushed myself, expected more than I thought I could give. And somehow through all that pushing and expecting, she helped me get better. The arm healed slowly. The shoulder healed even slower. But they healed. Week by week, month by month, I could feel the function coming back, the strength returning, the range of motion expanding. I was going to drive again. I'd known it in my gut from the beginning. But after 3 months of therapy, I knew it in my kidneys. I went back to the wreck site before I went back to work. Drove out there one afternoon in my personal truck, parked on the shoulder of the highway, and walked across the median to the spot where it had happened. There was nothing there anymore. No wreckage, no debris, just frozen grass and rutted dirt where the kick had gouged the earth. The highway department had cleaned it all up, hauled away the tractor and the trailer, smoothed out the ground as best they could. If you didn't know something had happened there, you'd never guess. Just another piece of median, just another section of highway. I stood there for a long time, feeling the wind. It was blowing that day too. Not as hard as it had been that night, but steady, constant, coming down off the mountains to the north. The same wind, the same stretch of road, the same empty landscape stretching to the horizon. But I was different. I was standing here instead of lying here, walking instead of trapped, alive instead of dying. I said something to the wind. Don't remember exactly what. Some kind of acknowledgement, some kind of goodbye. And then I walked back to my truck and drove home. I never went back to that spot again. The first load I hauled after the accident was a short run. Denver to Kansas City. Easy highway. Mild weather. The company wanted me to ease back into it, test my limits without pushing them. I was nervous the first time I climbed into a cab. More nervous than I'd been since my first day as a truck driver, back when I was 25 and didn't know anything. My hands were shaking when I started the pre-trip inspection. My heart was racing when I merged onto the interstate. But once I was moving, once I was out there on the road with the white lines disappearing under the hood and the miles clicking by, something settled inside me. This was what I knew, what I'd always known. The rhythm of the road, the partnership between driver and machine, the simple satisfaction of moving freight from one place to another. I could do this. I could still do this. The run went fine. Made the delivery on time. Called Karen from the truck stop to tell her I was okay. Drove home and slept better than I had in months. But things were different after that, in ways big and small, ways that I noticed and ways that I probably didn't. I checked the weather obsessively. Before every run, during every run, constantly monitoring conditions ahead, wind speed and direction, temperature changes, storm systems moving through, any hint that things might turn bad. I stopped driving in conditions that I would have pushed through before. Rain that seemed a little too heavy, snow that was coming down a little too fast, wind that felt a little too strong. If there was any doubt, any hesitation, I pulled over, parked it, waited. The dispatchers learned not to argue with me, learned that when I said I was stopping, I meant it, that no schedule, no penalty, no pressure from customers would change my mind. My life was worth more than any load. I knew that now, knew it in my bones. Some of the other drivers thought I'd gone soft, overcautious. Heard a few comments in truck stop parking lots. Old man's lost his nerve. Can't handle a little weather anymore. Let them talk. I didn't care. I'd been where they hadn't been. I'd seen what they hadn't seen. I'd hung in a frozen cab for 5 hours, wondering if I was going to die. They could think whatever they wanted. I knew what mattered. Time does strange things when you're trapped. I've thought about that a lot over the years. How minutes can feel like hours. How you can lose track of everything, except the immediate moment, the breath you're taking right now, the pain that's always there, the cold that keeps getting worse. I don't know how long I hung in that cab before the first vehicle passed. It might have been 20 minutes. It might have been an hour. The only way I could tell time was passing at all was that I kept getting colder. The cold was a clock. Not a good one, but the only one I had. When I finally heard an engine approaching, my heart jumped. Someone was coming. Someone would see the wreck and stop and help. I listened to that engine get closer. A car, not a truck. I could tell by the sound. Coming from the east, heading west. The same direction I'd been going. I waited for it to slow down. Waited for the headlights to swing toward me. Waited for the sound of a door opening, footsteps on frozen ground. A voice calling out. The engine passed by at full speed and faded into the distance. They hadn't seen me. Or they'd seen me and chosen not to stop. Either way, they were gone. I told myself it was okay. There would be others. This was a major interstate. Trucks and cars passing all night long. Someone would stop. Stop eventually. I just had to wait. More time. More time passed. More vehicles passed. I heard them every few minutes. That Doppler effect of engines approaching and receding. Some were trucks, the deep rumble of diesels under load. Some were cars higher pitched and quicker. None of them stopped. I started trying to figure out why. The truck was in the median, not on the highway itself. It was lying on its side, which might have made it less visible. The headlights were pointing away from the road, so there was no light to attract attention. From a passing car at 70 miles an hour, it probably just looked like a dark shape in the darkness. Easy to miss. Easy to ignore. I thought about the flares in the emergency kit. Every truck carries them. Supposed to use them when you break down or have an accident. Set them out along the road to warn other drivers. But the emergency kit was in the storage compartment, behind the cab, and there was no way I could reach it. I thought about my cell phone. It was in the center console probably, or had been before the crash. Now it could be anywhere. I couldn't see it, couldn't reach it even if I could see it. I thought about the Citizens Band radio still swinging just out of reach. If I could get to that microphone, I could call for help. Someone would hear. Someone would come. I tried again to reach it. Stretched my right arm as far as it would go. My fingers brushed the coiled cord, but couldn't grip it. Close, so close, but not close enough. The pain in my left shoulder was getting worse. A deep throbbing ache that seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat. Something was definitely damaged in there. Dislocated maybe. Or broken. I couldn't tell without being able to see it, to touch it, to move it. I let myself rest for a minute. Just breathe. Just exist. The wind was still blowing outside. I could hear it against the underside of the truck. Could feel the cab rocking slightly with each squeeze. Still trying to push me over. Still not done. I started talking to myself somewhere in there. Not because I thought anyone could hear. Just to fill the silence. Just to have a voice, even if it was my own. I talked about the load. About all those boxes of consumer goods scattered across the median behind me. About how someone was going to have to clean that up. File the insurance claims. Notify the customers that their freight wasn't coming. I talked about the truck. About 2 years of driving that particular tractor. All those miles we'd covered together. And now it was lying on its side, in a frozen field, and probably couldn't be saved. I talked about my family. My wife Karen back in Omaha. probably sleeping right now, not knowing. My daughter Sarah, who was going to be 12 next month. My son Michael, who was 14 and already talking about getting his license, about driving someday, maybe even driving trucks like his old man. I talked about what I was going to do when I got out of this. The first thing I told myself, the very first thing, I'm going to hug my wife, going to hold her for a long time, going to tell her I'm sorry for every stupid fight we ever had, every time I put the job ahead of the family, every road I should have stayed off and didn't. That's what I'm going to do, I said to the darkness. That's what I'm going to do when I get out of here. When? I said when, not if. The cold was really getting to me by then. Deep cold. The kind that starts in your extremities and works its way toward your core. My feet were numb. My fingers, at least on my right hand, were stiff and clumsy. My left side, pressed against that frozen door, felt like it was made of ice. I tried to move, tried to generate some body heat. But there wasn't much I could do hanging in a seatbelt with one arm trapped and the other barely able to reach anything. I could tense and release my muscles, could try to shift my weight, but it didn't help much. I thought about hypothermia, about the stages. You get cold first, obviously. Then you start shivering as your body tries to generate heat. Then, if it goes on long enough, the shivering stops. That's the dangerous part. That's when your body is giving up. Core temperature dropping. Organs starting to slow down. Brain getting fuzzy. I was shivering. Had been for a while. Violent shudders that I couldn't control that shook my whole body and made the pain in my shoulder worse with each tremor. But at least I was shivering. That meant I wasn't at the giving up stage yet. Small comfort. But I'd take what I could get. I found myself praying after a while. I'm not a religious man. Haven't been to church since I was young. Haven't given much thought to God or heaven, or any of that since I became an adult and got busy with the practical business of living. But hanging in that cab in the darkness, with the cold pressing in, and the hours passing and no help coming, I found myself saying words I didn't know I remembered. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. The Lord's Prayer. Something I'd learned as a kid, recited without understanding at Sunday school, forgotten for 30 years. And now it was coming back automatic, rising up from some deep place that the cold couldn't reach. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. I said it over and over, not because I thought God was listening, not because I expected divine intervention, just because it was something to say, something to think about, something to focus on, besides the pain and the cold and the fear. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. The words were a rhythm, a heartbeat, something to hold on to when everything else was slipping away. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. I must have said that prayer 100 times, maybe more. Lost count, lost track of everything except the words and the breathing and the slow progression of cold through my body. At some point, I started to get sleepy. Not tired in the normal way, but sleepy. That warm, drifting feeling that comes before sleep. That letting go. I knew what that meant. Knew it was bad. Hypothermia making my brain soft. Making it hard to think. Making it tempting to just close my eyes and rest for a while. I fought it. bit my lip hard enough to taste blood, tensed every muscle I could still feel, made myself recite things, the states in alphabetical order, the presidents in order, multiplication tables, anything to keep my brain working. I thought about Sarah's birthday party, March 15th. We were going to have it at the house. Karen was baking a cake, chocolate with vanilla frosting, Sarah's favorite. I was supposed to buy the present, some video game thing she wanted. The name was written down somewhere. In my wallet, maybe. A piece of paper with a name I couldn't pronounce. I'm going to buy that present, I told myself. I'm going to watch her face when she opens it. I'm going to be there for her 12th birthday. And her 13th. And her 30th. I'm going to be there. The sleepiness kept trying to pull me under, kept whispering that it would be okay, that rest would help, that I could close my eyes for just a minute. I kept fighting it, kept biting my lip, kept reciting things. Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas. I'm going to be there. The engine died at some point. I don't know exactly when. One moment, I could hear it idling, feel it vibrating through the frame. The next moment, it was quiet. Either it ran out of fuel, or overheated, or something else failed. It didn't matter. What mattered was that the last source of heat was gone. The heater fan kept running for a while, blowing cold air instead of warm. Then that stopped too. The battery dying. The last electrical systems shutting down. The headlights went out. The dashboard lights went out. Complete darkness now. Nothing but the stars visible through the cracked windshield, and the cold and the wind. That was the lowest point. That moment when even the truck gave up. When I was truly alone with nothing but my own body heat, which wasn't much, and my own willpower, which was fading. I thought about Karen again, about the conversation we'd had the morning before I left. Just a normal conversation. What to have for dinner when I got back. Whether the gutters needed cleaning. Ordinary things. The kind of things you say to someone you've been married to for 15 years without really thinking about them. I wished I'd said something different. Something that mattered. I love you. I'm grateful for you. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. I said those things sometimes, but not often enough. Not nearly often enough. I said them now to the darkness. Out loud, talking to a wife who was 200 miles away, asleep not knowing. I love you, Karen. I'm sorry for everything. I'm going to come home. I'm going to come home. I don't know how long it was between the engine dying and when Gerald showed up. Hours maybe. Or minutes. Time had stopped meaning anything. I was just existing. Moment to moment. Breath to breath. Fighting the cold and the sleep and the growing certainty that nobody was coming. But then there were lights. Headlights sweeping across the median, different from the ones that had passed on the highway. These were closer, moving slower, coming toward me instead of past me. I thought I was hallucinating at first. The hypothermia playing tricks, showing me what I wanted to see instead of what was really there. But the lights kept coming, got brighter, closer. I could hear an engine now. A smaller one. A pickup truck maybe. And then it stopped. Maybe 50 feet away. The headlights pointed at the wreck, illuminating the overturned tractor, the scattered debris, the whole terrible scene. A door opened. I heard it over the wind. Heard footsteps on frozen ground. boots crunching through the snow and dead grass. And then a voice. "Hello, anyone in there? Hello?" I tried to answer, tried to yell, but my voice was barely there, just a croak, a whisper. The cold had done something to my throat, to my lungs. I couldn't make the sounds I needed to make, but I could move my hand. I banged it against the steering wheel, against the dashboard, against anything that would make noise. The footsteps came closer. The voice came again. "I hear you. Hold on. I'm going to call for help. Just hold on." That voice, that ordinary human voice in the darkness. A stranger who had stopped when no one else did, who was standing in a frozen field in the middle of the night, calling for help on my behalf. I started crying. Couldn't help it. The relief was too big to hold inside. Someone had come. Someone had found me. I wasn't going to die alone in this truck. His name was Gerald. I found that out later. He was a rancher from north of Cheyenne, driving home from his brother's place. He'd seen the truck in the median, and something had made him stop. Most people wouldn't have. The highway was right there, warm and dry and leading home. The wreck was down in the ditch in the dark in the wind. Nothing about it said, "Please stop. This is worth your time." But Gerald stopped, got out of his warm truck, walked through that frozen field to check if anyone was alive. He stayed with me until the fire department arrived, talked to me through the cracked windshield. Couldn't get the doors open, couldn't get me out, but he stayed. Told me about his ranch, his cattle, the winter feeding schedule, his wife, who was going to be mad that he was late getting home. Just ordinary talk. Nothing important. The most important talk I'd ever heard. The fire trucks showed up, maybe 20 minutes later. Red lights flashing across the landscape. Firefighters piling out with tools and equipment. Someone yelling orders. Someone else calling for an ambulance. They got me out with the jaws of life. Cut through the roof of the cab to make an opening big enough to pull me through. Two of them reached in and lifted me while another held my head stable, not knowing if I had a spinal injury. The sun was coming up by then. That pale winter sunrise, orange and pink along the eastern horizon. I remember looking at it as they loaded me onto the stretcher, looking at the sky and thinking I never thought I'd see another sunrise. And here it is. Here it is. They took me to the hospital in Cheyenne. Left arm broken in 2 places, shoulder dislocated, 3 cracked ribs, mild concussion from the impact, frostbite on my fingers and toes, though not severe. They said I was lucky. Another hour out there, and the frostbite would have been much worse. Another 2 hours, and the hypothermia might have killed me. Lucky, that's what they said. I didn't feel lucky. I felt tired. More tired than I'd ever felt in my life. Tired in my bones. Tired in my soul. Karen flew in the next day. Walked into that hospital room and just stood there, looking at me for the longest time. Didn't say anything. Didn't have to. When she finally spoke, she said, "It's okay. Everything's okay." The company called. They said the load was a total loss, but nobody cares about that. Nobody cares about any of that. I told her about the wind, about the flag standing straight out, about how I should have stopped, should have pulled over and waited. She took my hand, the good one, the one that wasn't wrapped in bandages and a plaster. She said, "You're here. That's what matters. You're here." I spent 2 weeks in that hospital. Surgeries on the arm, physical therapy for the shoulder, monitoring for the concussion and the frostbite. Then another month at home recovering, learning to use my left arm again, learning to sleep through the night without waking up in that cab. That was the hardest part. The dreams. Every night I was back there, hanging in the seatbelt, listening for headlights that never came, waiting in the cold and the dark for a rescue that sometimes arrived and sometimes didn't. I'd wake up sweating, heart pounding, certain for a few terrible seconds that I was still trapped. Then I'd feel the bed beneath me, the warmth of the blankets, Karen's hand reaching out in the darkness. "You're home," she'd say. "You're safe. It's over." But it wasn't over. Not really. Not for a long time. I went back to driving 4 months later. The company offered me a desk job in the dispatch office, but I turned it down. I didn't know how to do anything else. Trucking was all I knew, all I'd ever known. The idea of sitting in an office watching other men drive the loads I used to drive was worse than getting back behind the wheel. The first few trips were hard. Every time the wind picked up, I felt my hands tighten on the wheel. Every time I approached an open stretch of highway, I found myself checking the flags at every truck stop, looking for that rigid horizontal that meant stop. That meant wait. That meant don't be stupid like you were before. I became a different kind of driver, more cautious, more aware. If the weather looked bad, I stopped. If the wind was strong, I pulled over. I didn't care about making appointments. Didn't care about being late. Didn't care about what the dispatcher might say. The company understood. Most of them had been driving for years themselves. They knew what the road could do, knew what it was like to have a close call, to face your own mortality out there in the dark. They gave me the time I needed, let me run at my own pace. I never drove that stretch of Wyoming at night again, not once in the 20 years after. If my route took me through Cheyenne, I made sure to hit that section in daylight. If that wasn't possible, I found a different route, went south through Denver, took Interstate 70 through Kansas instead. Whatever I had to do through it to avoid being on Interstate 80 east of Cheyenne after dark. Some might call that cowardice. Some might say I should have faced my fears, driven through that stretch 100 times until it didn't scare me anymore. I call it knowing my limits, knowing what I could handle and what I couldn't. The road taught me something that night. Taught me that there are forces out there bigger than any truck, bigger than any driver, bigger than any schedule or deadline or paycheck. And sometimes the smartest thing you can do is stop. Wait. Let the wind blow itself out. Get there a few hours late, but get there alive. I retired 5 years ago, 61 years old, 36 years behind the wheel. My back was starting to go like my father's did. My eyes weren't as sharp for night driving anymore. The physical exam was getting harder to pass every year. It was time. I don't miss it as much as I thought I would. The open road, the independence, the satisfaction of moving freight from one place to another. I thought those things would leave a hole when I stopped, but they didn't. Or if they did, other things filled it. Karen and I moved to Arizona, bought a little farm outside Tucson. Warm weather, dry air, the kind of climate that's good for old bones and old injuries. I can sit on the porch and watch the sunset over the desert, can feel the heat soaking into my joints, loosening them up, making the aches less sharp. My daughter is grown now, married, has 2 kids of her own. She brings them to visit a few times a year. They call me Grandpa and ask me to tell them stories about driving trucks. I tell them the good stories, the funny ones. The time I got lost in downtown Chicago and drove my rig down a street that was way too narrow. The time I delivered a load of live chickens and one escaped into the cab and rode with me for 300 miles before I could catch it. Stories that make them laugh. I don't tell them about Wyoming. Don't tell them about the wind and the cold and the darkness. Those aren't stories for children. I think about Gerald sometimes, the rancher who stopped. I tried to find him a few years after the accident, drove back to Cheyenne and asked around, described him, told people what he'd done. Nobody knew who I was talking about. There are a lot of ranches north of Cheyenne, a lot of men who fit the description I gave. I left my name and number with a few people, asked them to pass it along if they ever met him. Nobody ever called. Maybe he moved away. Maybe he passed on. Maybe he just doesn't remember that night the way I do. For him, it was probably just a thing that happened. A detour on his way home. A few hours in the cold, helping a stranger who'd gotten himself into trouble. For me, it was everything. It was my life. The one I almost lost and got to keep because a stranger decided to stop. I never got to thank him properly. Never got to tell him what that meant. What it still means 22 years later. Gerald, if you're out there, if you ever hear this somehow, thank you. Thank you for stopping. Thank you for staying. Thank you for the life I've had since that night. I still dream about it sometimes. Not as often as I used to. Maybe once a month now. Sometimes less. The dream is always the same. I'm hanging in that cab. The wind is blowing. The cold is pressing in. And I'm waiting. In the dream, the headlights never come. Gerald never stops. The sun never rises. I just hang there forever, suspended in that endless night, trapped in the space between the accident and the rescue. And then I wake up, and I'm in my bed in Arizona, and Karen is there beside me, and the sun is coming through the curtains, and I remember that I made it, that someone found me, that I got to go home, that I'm still here. The thing about surviving something like that is it never really ends. You carry it with you every day in ways you don't notice until they show up. I can't stand the cold anymore, even mild cold. Even a cool evening in Arizona makes me want to go inside, wrap myself in blankets, get close to the heater. My body remembers what my mind would prefer to forget. I don't like small spaces. Elevators make me nervous. Cramped rooms make me nervous. Anything that feels too tight, too confining, brings back that feeling of being pinned, of not being able to move, of being trapped. And the wind, God, the wind. When the wind picks up here in Arizona, I go inside, close the curtains, turn on the television loud enough to cover the sound. I don't like hearing it. Don't like being reminded. Karen doesn't say anything. She just sits with me, puts her hand on mine, waits for it to pass. That's love, I think. Not trying to fix someone, not telling them to get over it, or be stronger or move on. Just being there. Just waiting with them until the storm passes. My son drives trucks now. Started a few years ago. Regional routes, mostly home every other day. Not like the long-haul runs I used to do. but still trucking, still moving freight, still part of the family tradition. I worry about him sometimes, can't help it. He's my son out there on the roads I know too well, facing the dangers I've seen firsthand. But you can't live your life worrying, can't protect your children from everything, can't wrap them in cotton and keep them safe forever. At some point, you have to let them go. Let them make their own choices, their own mistakes. I told him one thing when he started, just one piece of advice. Watch the flags, I said. When you see them standing straight out, park it. Wait. Don't try to be a hero. Don't try to make your schedule. No load is worth dying for. No appointment is worth your life. He nodded, said he understood. I hope he does. I hope that when he sees those flags standing rigid in the wind, he remembers what I told him. Remembers that his father knows something about what can happen when you don't stop. It's late now. The lamp is making my eyes tired. Karen is asleep in the other room. The house is quiet, except for the sound of the wind outside. Yes, the wind. It picked up about an hour ago. Not bad. Just a desert breeze, really. Nothing like Wyoming. But I hear it. Can't help hearing it. I've been sitting here thinking about that night, 22 years ago. A different man in a different time. But still me. Still the same person who made those choices, ignored those signs, kept driving when he should have stopped. I don't know why I'm thinking about it tonight. Why the memory came back so strong. Maybe it's the wind. Maybe it's just the way the mind works when you get older. Circling back to the things that shaped you. The moments that changed everything. I used to wonder if the accident made me a different person. If I would have turned out different somehow, if it hadn't happened. If I would have been happier or sadder, or just different in ways I can't imagine. I don't wonder anymore. Of course it changed me. How could it not? You don't hang in a cab for 5 hours in the freezing dark, wondering if you're going to die and come out the other side unchanged. But different doesn't mean worse. Or better. Just different. I'm more cautious now. More careful. More aware of how quickly things can go wrong. But I'm also more grateful. More appreciative of the ordinary moments. A sunrise. A meal with my family. A quiet evening on the porch. I know how close I came to losing all of that. And knowing that makes me hold on to it tighter. The wind is picking up more now. I can hear it around the corners of the house. A different sound from Wyoming, but still wind. Still that ancient force that doesn't care about schedules or deadlines or the plans of men. I should go to bed. Should turn off the lamp and lie down next to Karen and close my eyes. But I am not quite ready. Not yet. The memory is still here, still sitting with me, asking to be acknowledged, asking to be remembered. That's the deal you make with your memories. You can't ignore them, can't bury them, can't pretend they never happened. You just have to give them their time. Sit with them. Let them say what they need to say. And then eventually they let you go. The thing I remember most even now is Gerald's voice. Hello, anyone in there? 5 words, just 5 ordinary words. The kind you might say 100 times in your life without thinking about them. But in that moment, in that darkness, after all those hours alone, they were everything. They were proof that I wasn't forgotten, proof that someone cared, proof that I was going to make it. Hello, anyone in there? Yes, I was in there. I'm still in here. 22 years later, and I'm still here. Thanks to the wind that taught me a lesson. Thanks to the cold that almost killed me. Thanks to a stranger who stopped when no one else did. I'm going to turn off the lamp now. Going to get up from this chair and walk to the bedroom and lie down next to my wife. The wind will still be blowing tomorrow. It always is, somewhere. But I'll still be here too. Still breathing. Still remembering. That's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything.